Hello, Snap Crew viewers. Thank you for watching this very special interview from Dan the Man, featuring the legendary Alan Bean Foster. His most notable works include the Human X Commonwealth universe and the Spellsinger series, but not only that, he was the ghostwriter for the original novelization of Star Wars. He wrote the prequel era The Approaching Storm in 2003, as well as the novelization of The Force Awakens in 2005. He has the story credit for Star Trek the Motion Picture, as well as wrote 10 books based on the animated Star Trek, as well as the novelizations for Alien and Aliens. Thank you again for joining us. Enjoy.
Mr. Alan Foster, I would like to thank you so much. Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good. How about you?
Doing well, sir. Doing well. It is 12 in the noon I'm in North Carolina right now, and it's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful day. Pollen gets me, but what are you gonna do?
And my wife's got the same problem. She doesn't like to breathe outside between April and September, so I understand.
Gotcha. Sir, I would like to thank you so much for not only replying, but for wanting to chop it up with a mere fan. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. The thing all writers do best is find ways to avoid writing. So I'm happy to do one interview after another. Then I don't have to do any work.
That is the first time I have actually. No, I understand. I'm a writer myself, but that's the first time I've actually heard a writer doesn't want to write.
The only writer I ever met who really enjoyed writing was Isaac Asimov.
Okay.
He would write every day.
Right.
And then his idea of a vacation was to go lock himself in a room and write some more.
So that's all he knew, just writing.
Just write. I mean, he was an associate professor of biochemistry in Boston.
Okay.
But what he really liked to do was just write, and the words just spilled out of him. And unlike the rest of us, we really have to work at it.
Well, you know what they say, when you're writing a story and, you have a character in mind, the character really speaks to you. And then from there, the character just takes over. So maybe, I guess he was really in tune with his creative process,
Well, that's true for all of us if it's working. When the magic is happening,
right,
that's what happens. The characters take over. But I think it was a little different for Ike, because I think every one of his characters, of course, he didn't really do Alien, except rarely. All of his stories featured people.
Right.
They were all just slight variations on himself.
Okay. Oh.
So basically, this character was Isaac speaking in one voice, and then the next character was Isaac speaking in another voice. And if you read his book, you don't see a whole lot of variation between characters. You have an echo, I think, at your end of my voice. So I want to check recording equipment.
And I hear it as well. I think on my end you sound a little further, but yeah, I don't know. Zoom, it likes to work sometimes. It's because I'm sorry.
That's all right. You sound fine.
Oh,
so it's obviously a fine.
Okay.
See if that helps. Nope, same. No, we'll just plow ahead.
Okay. Cool. Well, I want you to feel like you're not being interviewed. We're just at the end of the day, we're humans and we're just talking. You know what I mean?
That's the way I do mine.
Okay.
Now, my wife is convinced I'm silly.
Right.
So it's a little different talking to her, because she kind of looks at me like,
right.
But No, I treat every, it doesn't matter if I'm being interviewed by the Wall Street Journal or
Mhm.
Dan in North Carolina.
Mm,
Same person, same responses, same everything, every way. This is why I don't work in Hollywood or politics.
right. No, especially in today's world. No, we don't do that.
I got asked to run for Congress twice.
Did you?
Yeah, well, I live in central Arizona, and the politics here tend to be somewhat, shall we say politely, conservative.
Of
What I
course.
really mean to say is somewhat to the right of Attila the Hun. But so it's hard to find somebody to run sometimes on. I'm an independent. I always have been
Yeah.
on the
Yes.
Democratic ticket. And I was asked, and I asked my wife, Joanne, I said, what do you think I should do? And she said, if you go into politics, first I'll kill you, then I'll divorce you.
So that was the answer right there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I did a brief stint on the Planning and Zoning Commission for a couple of years, and that was enough politics for me.
For one lifetime, right?
Yeah. But I'm sure you have questions, and I'll ramble on like this for days until my body falls over. So I'll let you go ahead since this is technically supposed to be an interview.
Sir, I will have you know that I can listen to you ramble on for hours, but Zoom can, since no one likes paying for Zoom, we only have 40 minutes. But if you enjoy talking to me, and the interview goes well, we can send out more Zoom links and keep going till the cows come home if you want. I mean, I got all day.
It's up to you. I'm not shy. You probably divined that already. So when I actually have to convince myself I have to do some work or something else, like change cat boxes, I'll let you know.
For sure. And when Zoom does, and either you'll see it or I'll definitely see it, that it'll say 10 minutes or 5 minutes left or something, and then it'll just cut, but we'll get cross that bridge when we get to it. So, Mr. Foster, is that okay if I've been going by that? Is that okay if I call you?
No, I much prefer Alan.
Alan? Okay.
I have this theory that if everybody, like in Congress and the United Nations, called each other by their first names,
Right.
things would move a little more smoothly. But nobody listens to me on stuff like that. So, I mean, in Hollywood, everybody calls each other by their first name.
Right.
I'd much prefer they called each other by their last name sometimes, but and nobody asked.
It's Hollywood, man. It's a different place. Alan, let's take this to the beginning. What is it that got you into science fiction? The beginning, as you were on the come up back in the day, you're a young kid, and you just that one thought that took you on the path of, you know what, I want to do this for the rest of my life, and I really love science fiction. How was that process like, and how'd you get through it?
My father always read science fiction, not a lot, but he did. And when I started reading very young. Started with the Donald Duck and Uncle Scrooge comics by Karl Barks.
Okay.
And when I started reading books, of course, you had your assigned stuff in school, which was mostly like 19th century American and French and British novels.
Sure.
Which is really thrilling if you're like, a 12-year-old kid. That's what you want to read. And I found science fiction in my father had two books. He had Nine Tomorrows, which was a collection of short stories by Isaac Asimov.
Okay.
And another one called The World of Nale by E. Van Vogt. The first one I kind of got through. The second one defeated me completely. I went back to reading classics. My senior year in high school, I rediscovered science fiction. I had more ability to figure out what was going on in the stories.
Right.
And so I started reading a lot of science fiction for pleasure. Never gave any thought to being a writer. You remember those tests that you have to take in like 9th grade, usually 10th grade, aptitude tests, where they attempt to give you a direction in your life because obviously you can't figure one out for yourself.
So they say.
Yes. And mine kept saying lawyer, lawyer, lawyer. We had lawyers in the family. So I figured, all right, why not? I'll be a lawyer.
Sure.
What I really wanted to do was travel, but I couldn't find a job.
The funds to do that.
Exactly.
Mm.
So I got into UCLA. I majored in poli-sci. as a precursor to going to law school. My senior year at UCLA, I discovered the film department. Now, this is one of the three great film departments in the United States: UCLA, USC, NYU.
Hmm.
And I figured, well, I'll take some writing course. I'll take a writing course or two just to get credits, to get enough credits to
Sure.
graduate.
Right.
Because I'd always been a facile writer. It had always been easy for me. Probably the only kid in my school who looked forward to essay tests.
Came natural to you.
Exactly. So I took some writing courses, and I also, needing some more credits, found out there were such things as film history courses. And
There you
this
go.
was great. What a racket. You
Right.
go in, the professor talks for 15 minutes, and you watch Buster Keaton for 2 hours. 4 units, same as 4 units of physics.
Yeah.
So I took a lot of film history courses, and I took a lot more writing courses and did well in those.
Mhm.
And my senior year, I thought I would apply to the graduate film school. I was having such a good time watching movies and writing at UCLA, never thinking I would get in,
Right.
because competing against these kids like Spielberg, who've been making 8mm movies since they were 10 years old. But I got into the
Mhm.
writing program.
Mhm.
While I was there, I thought, in addition to all of these class assignments, which were screenplays and teleplays, I'll try writing some short fiction, try
Mm.
writing some prose. And I
Okay.
sold a couple of short stories while I was a grad student at UCLA.
Right.
And it occurred to me that this was a lot more fun than getting up early in the morning and putting on a suit and a tie and looking up precedents for the rest of my life.
Yes.
So my last couple of semesters at UCLA was getting ready to go in the Army. This, of course, was Vietnam era.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I thought, well, before that happens, I'll see if I can write a novel. And then 20 years from now, when I'm a lawyer and I'm at some business convention or party and somebody says, "What are you doing with your life?" I can say, "I'm working on a novel."
Mhm.
And lo and behold, it sold on third submission. And I thought, this is great. I got a part-time teaching job at LA City College, teaching at night. So my daytime was free for writing and body surfing. And to actually answer your question, I started writing science fiction because that's what I knew from reading for pleasure. And that's what I sold. And that's how I got started.
Well, it sounds like as you were going through the story, I mainly tuned in to the fact that everything was falling into place for you, and I feel like that it's it fell into place for what you wanted to do. No, really, like you had no time. I mean, if you did, you probably left them out, but I wouldn't blame you. Building blocks, for lack of a better term, on your way to this breakthrough in your career that's got you where you're at today.
That's
I
right.
mean,
Wasn't planned. Sometimes I feel very guilty because there are a lot of people I know who wanted to be writers.
mm-hmm.
It never happened for them. I didn't particularly want to be a writer. What I wanted to do was travel.
Right.
But as you say, everything fell into place and it just happened. I certainly never thought, even after I had sold my first couple of novels, never thought I'd make a living at it. And I never thought I would be somewhere far down the line like now, where I had managed to make a nice career out of it. It
Sure.
just sometimes in life things just happen.
There you go. So then that's another thing I want to talk about. So you're at this peak in your career, the height of your career, I should say. I really want to dive into how passion can make you feel like the grind isn't there, if that makes sense. Or maybe you might disagree with that notion, but
George Orwell once said that anyone who wants to be a writer is certifiable. People say, well, you must enjoy what you do.
mm-hmm.
I have to tell them, no, I don't enjoy what I do. It is hard, endless labor,
Yes.
because there's nothing more frightening than a blank piece of paper or a blank computer screen. And in the back of your mind, you know that there are people you're going to have to ask to pay real money to buy your words. And that's a tremendous burden for anyone to be under. Now, sure, there are writers and have always been writers who just write. They don't care if it sells, they don't care if anybody reads it. But I think they're very definitely in the minority. Most artists, whether they're writers, musicians, painters, sculptors, whatever, they want their work to be appreciated by other people. And I'm, aside from making a living at it, I'm exactly the same way. I love it when somebody writes me and says, "Hey, I just finished this book and it was great, and I particularly enjoyed this part." That makes me feel that I'm practicing my craft well. I've
Okay.
always, I've always had that feeling.
Okay.
You can't just do something in a vacuum and and pretend that, well, I'm going to make this short film. I don't care if anybody sees it. That's silly.
Right. No, no, yeah, of course. It's real funny you mentioned that because I myself am a independent filmmaker who made a breakthrough with a Star Wars short film. I'm actually on my way to do another one, not related to Star Wars. It's an original story I created. I'm looking in pre-production soon. And what I find interesting is that as I'm writing these stories, because I'm also, not only do I write, but I direct and act in my own stuff as well. And it's, to me, it's fun. I I I never, but my personality, much like yourself, I've never known no strangers. I'm not shy at all either. So I'm not afraid of, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, there can be a lot of criticism, on your work and that, but it's not nothing that makes me want to stop. It makes me want to do better. And
There's constructive criticism, and then there are people who just seem to get a charge out of being negative about stuff.
unfortunately, that is also true. Yeah.
A lot of the people who everybody gets criticism. I didn't sell my first 12 stories that I submitted, but
Mm-hmm.
I kept at it.
Mm-hmm.
There's when you're getting constructive criticism. When
Yes.
somebody says, "Look, your lighting in this scene is so dark that I can't see what's going on," that's valid criticism.
Right.
Somebody else says, "This looks stupid." There's people who don't know how to do criticism. But
Exactly.
constructive criticism is like gold. I had a guy, another writer, who was doing reviews for a magazine, write a review of my fourth novel, which he generally liked, but he had some specific criticisms. And possibly because he was a writer himself, successful writer, I was reading the review. Don't let anybody tell you nobody reads your reviews. Nobody reads the reviews. I was reading the review, and I thought, he's right about that. And stuff like that, you can't go back and change the book or the film
Right.
necessarily, but you keep that in mind for the next thing you do. So I'm a big supporter of valid criticism.
Of course. And it goes back to that mindset of no one wants to make terrible products. Like, we all want our stuff to be good, you know. I don't know anyone that just makes, I mean, like those writers you were talking about that just write to write and doesn't care. Like you said, that's ridiculous. But I'm sorry, my words, not yours. You said silly, I said ridiculous, but it's okay.
both valid,
Huh?
both, both valid. I'll tell you a story. I was very lucky.
Mm-hmm.
I had this happen to me when I was just getting started in my career. Again, I was getting ready to go in the army, and in addition to finishing working on the novel, I was still writing some short fiction,
Right.
because that's a good way to make a few bucks, get your name out there.
Sure.
And I'd written this story, and I gave it to a writer named David Gerald,
Okay.
who had done a couple of anthologies for Ballantine books,
Hmm.
and he said, "I can't use this, but I know another writer, friend of mine, Harlan Ellison, who is putting together a big anthology called Dangerous Visions, and
Okay.
it might be suitable for him." So he gave me Harlan's address, phone number. I called. Harlan said, "Sure, come on up." I went up to his house in Sherman Oaks, which is part of Los Angeles. And he greeted me at the door in his bathrobe, and I went in, and he read the story very quickly. And he said, Harlan was a very straightforward guy. And he said, "I love your ending, but the story is shit. Would you be open to some suggestions if I were to make them?" And I said, "Of course." And I did about 3 or 4 revisions of the story, none of which quite satisfied him. I then had the choice between doing more revisions on the story or finishing the novel before I went into basic training. So I decided to finish the novel. I then sent the story to John W. Campbell, who also very famous writer,
Yeah.
editor. had published my first story,
Jean
the
Campbell.
editor of Analog Science Fiction Fantasy.
Okay.
And I got it back from him with a note saying, I love your story, but the ending is crap. So two very well-known, very successful writer editors like diametrically opposed things about exactly the same story. And
Yeah.
that what that told me was, yes, you can listen, you can take criticism, you can listen to suggestions, but in the end, you're the one who has to make the final decisions. And you can't just write to what other people think is what you should be writing to.
Right. Because in the end, sometimes that doesn't even make for good storytelling. Quality over quantity, right?
In the end, unless you're a Hollywood filmmaker, you have to take responsibility for what's on the printed page or what's up on screen because it's your name up there. That's why when I do a movie adaptation, a novelization,
Mhm.
Even though I could throw anything I want in there and get paid, forget about it,
Sure.
as long as the editor accepts it. I feel a personal sense of responsibility to do the best job I can because people are going to pay money for it, and it's my name that's on the cover.
If only everyone thought like you did, we would probably have good storytelling today. Um, let's dive into what I would like to know your take on what should the next aspiring author or creative mindset do to be the best that they can be and make their dreams a reality as well.
I just mentioned one thing. In the end, you take responsibility for whatever you produce.
Right.
The other thing is, let's see. The main thing is whatever you want to write or film
Mm-hmm.
or compose, you need to listen or watch or read a lot of it because for several reasons. There's nothing worse than spending a year working on, say, a short film, only to find out that it's an exact copy, idea wise and approach wise, of a black and white film that came out from Fox in 1933.
Right.
That will crush you. So you need to know, you need to have a full background on what you want to do. If you want to write science fiction, you have to read a lot of science fiction. And I
Sure.
don't mean just contemporary science fiction. You need to go back. There are a lot of anthologies of early science fiction, early modern science fiction, by which I mean science fiction starting in the late 20s and
Mhm.
coming forward. You need to know what's been done so you don't repeat it.
Right.
Same thing with film. I'm sure you watch a lot of film, not just to pick up techniques and ideas and such like everybody else does, but and for fun, but so that you don't do something that's already been done before. So that's you need to prepare your ground there. It's just like building a house. You need to study the geology first if you're working with a bare piece of land.
For sure.
So that's the main thing I would advise people to do. Don't be afraid to ask for criticism, as long as you respect the person who's going to do it. If you make short films, you try to get into film festivals. You might show them at universities. If you're writing, there are always writers groups organized around libraries, around colleges. Go in, read your story, or make copies, let other people read your story, and then see what they think. And you may disagree, sometimes strongly, with what they say, but every once in a while you get a little nugget in there that says, "Hey, you're right. If we just change this character from male to female, we've got a completely different take on this story." That's what happened with Alien.
Right. Oh, really?
Alien was originally written, the main character, Ripley, was originally written as a guy.
No. What?
At the last minute, before starting, before no going back, they decided, well, what if we make this character a woman? And that's how Sigourney Weaver got that part. And practically nothing was changed from the original writing. So
Ripley did always have more, I guess you could say, certain type of demeanor about her.
you see it in reverse. When you know that, suddenly certain things make a little more sense. You look at the character in a different way, but it doesn't change the character. Little things like that. Um, when you're writing, again, pertaining to your question, try to, or making a film, anything applies to all art. What can I do starting this project that's different? You know, I don't mean start it out as a comedy and then make your character, you know, a mass murderer, although that's been done. Uh,
Sure.
but what can I do that makes it? What can I do that will catch people's attention and make them want to continue on reading this book, listening to this music, watching this film? What can I do that's a little different? Not just for the sake of being different. We see a lot of that in modern art.
Right.
You know, people throw bricks against a wall full of concrete, so the bricks stick in the wall. I'm just making this up. I haven't done this or seen it. And then you cut the whole panel out and you present it as art. And so we get an awful lot of junk today that attempts to pass as art. I write a column on art and science for 5 cents as a local
Okay.
monthly paper. Um, People are just trying to do something different. And 98% of it, unless you're an art critic and need something to write about, I guess, doesn't work. It's just garbage. Sometimes it's literally garbage. But people are trying to do something different. They're trying to attract attention.
Right. I mean, art can be looked at as subjective. I mean, I had to recast an actor in my film because the previous actor that I had in mind read through the script and unfortunately just didn't speak to him. But it totally spoke to the actor that I recasted for the part. And, you know, mind you, me and that specific actor, we actually worked in a play that spoke on certain issues that my film also speaks on. So you cannot win them all. You cannot win them all.
And that's why, in the end, it's up to you. You have to make a decision for what you want.
Right.
You are the creator behind this eventual project.
Yes.
Art is a painting, sculpture is a little more subjective than film or books,
Sure.
certainly. I mean, the words say something. Somebody may interpret them in a different way, but it's a little more concrete than just art. It's like the difference between gymnastics and track.
Yeah.
Gymnastics is completely subjective within a certain frame.
Right.
Track, the guy who finishes first wins.
There you go.
No subjectiveness about that.
Simple, straight to the point, cut the check.
Right. So there are variations throughout all art. Music is another good example. Certain music speaks to me, certain music does not. I can respect the music that does not for the work that went into it, but it doesn't mean it's something I want to put on and listen to for half an hour.
Of course, because it's not going to help you get through the day. You want to listen to something that can help you relax and meditate. Yeah, yeah.
Right, or think.
Yeah, right. Helps your creative mindset in your writing process, right?
Right. Arthur C. Clarke, who was a great science fiction writer, wrote 2001: A Space Odyssey. He used to put on the music for Star Wars when he wanted to get inspired. He was having a tough time getting started. A lot of people would say, "Oh, what are you talking about, Arthur? Why wouldn't you put on Beethoven or Mozart?"
Right.
That didn't inspire him. So it's what works for you. In the end, it's always what works for you.
And I feel like you know it was coming, Alan, but I gotta ask. We talk about Aliens, Star Wars, Transformers, all the big IPs. I got to know, what is your current mindset on all of that stuff today that you've seen? You know, we went through Michael Bay's Transformers, we went through the sequel trilogy, there's Prometheus, reboots, prequel, all of that stuff in 2021. What are your current thoughts on everything that we have? And yes.
Well, you're working for a different audience. If you're making a film, a big film, for a big, presumed big audience, you unfortunately have to make that film sometimes for the lowest common denominator of viewer.
Okay.
You might want to make a different kind of film, but when you're talking about tens or sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars at stake, as a filmmaker in that situation, and I've talked to filmmakers in that situation, I said, well, I'd really rather do this, but a lot of people won't get it, or it's not commercial enough. It's a different situation.
Right.
And you're under a lot of constraints. It's not your money, but you're playing around with millions and millions of dollars of other people's money. You're not a free agent as a creator, like you are in your current situation, for example. And there are a lot of people looking over your shoulder, and they're saying things like, well, where's the girl? And can we shoot a few more people in this scene? Uh, people, um, they pound on Michael Bay a lot,
Yep.
but he makes commercial films and he makes them well. You may not like the result, but that's not the critical thing with a commercial film. The critical thing with a commercial film, unfortunately, is it going to make money? If it
Yeah.
doesn't, if it doesn't, you don't get to make another film, and that
Right.
stays in the back of your mind as well. When you're not dealing with tens of millions of dollars, I'm pretty sure you're not. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
you make what you want. Robert Rodriguez got started by he made his first film for 20, I think it was $25,000 was the total budget, maxed out his credit cards, borrowed money from his family, his doctor, anybody he could get money from, and managed to make a film that got noticed at a lot of film festivals in Hollywood. And now he's a major commercial director. Not everybody wants to do that. It's really tough to make a good, since we're talking science fiction specifically now,
Right.
good science fiction film that's real science fiction that satisfies both the critics, the audience, and the bottom line. When that happens, you get a film like Arrival. I don't know if you've seen Arrival.
I've
That's real science fiction,
is that's not the is that the one with Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner?
where the alien ships just suddenly appear
Yep. Yep.
and time, which is a critical ingredient in it, time is seen circular instead of in a straight line.
Right.
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
That is, interestingly enough, based on a short story by Ted Chiang, an actual writer of science fiction. This
Really?
is something that Hollywood doesn't seem to get very often either. There are actually science fiction stories that make really good movies if you get the right person to direct, the right people to produce. There's another film called Annihilation, recent film. I'm
Heard
thinking
of
of
that.
recent, based on a book by a guy who writes science fiction, Jeff Vandermeer.
Mm-hmm.
These are exceptions. What will be really interesting for me, since we're talking about the current cycle of these films,
Right.
a book that's often voted one of the top, always voted one of the top three modern science fiction books of all time, is Dune by Frank Herbert.
Yes.
Okay. Dune is being directed by Denis Villeneuve,
Okay.
who directed Arrival. So here's
Mm.
a guy who obviously loves science fiction, did a terrific job directing a science fiction film, is now given one of the biggest projects to come along in a very long time.
Right. Right.
And the previews that they showed before COVID shut everything down theater wise look phenomenal. And we'll see what kind of a job he does with the finished film. I
Yes.
believe it's intended to be two films. The book is a very big book. And the
Yeah.
idea, I think, is to do it as two films, of which only the first one has been done so far,
Right.
for the obvious reason that the backing studio, I think it's Warner, will wait to see, if it burns and crashes, makes a lot of money, breaks even. Uh,
Like you
I
said.
think if it at least breaks even, you'll see the second half.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And with a film like Dune, I mean, that has a lot of mythology, and much like Star Wars, it could definitely span trilogy or even spin off into other territories if it's successful. Like you said, if the first one crashes and burns, them, we'll never know, I guess.
Well, Frank did several sequels himself, Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, and the series has been spun off uh, in a whole series of
Right,
related books.
right. Of course.
Uh, so there's plenty. I'm sure that was one of the things that brought the studio into the project in the first place. It's like, well, if this does hit big, maybe we have a franchise.
There you go.
But it is not an easy film. It is not. It's not
No.
Star Wars.
No.
This is a film that takes, or this is a story that takes, people. It requires the viewer's attention, just like it requires the reader's attention to
Right.
understand what's going on.
And the audience isn't dumb. I mean, and some reason Hollywood treats them like they are, which is why we haven't had certain things. But now with Marvel, you're going into the multiverse of madness, but which has already been, some of those elements have been plugged in the first Doctor Strange and Infinity War. And, it's audience can understand these things. They're not I feel like the audience members, the general public only really tunes out if stories bore them. But if you have a story that is interesting, not only that people relate to, but that's just flat out that people like. If you find what people like, then they'll come and watch it.
And it's funny, this is nothing new. A lot of people don't know that Alexander Dumas wrote a sequel to The Three Musketeers because the book, The Three Musketeers, was so about 20 years after. Uh, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Picks up the Musketeers 20 years later because the first book was so successful.
Right.
Jules Verne came up with a character named Rober, kind of a Captain Nemo type,
Right. Right.
Rober the Conqueror, and wrote subsequent books featuring this character. Arthur Conan Doyle. This is nothing again. How many Sherlock Holmes stories did Arthur Conan Doyle write? And so this is nothing new. If writers, if artists hit a character, story, or both that people like, they're not averse to doing sequels. So just saying something is a sequel does not automatically condemn it as a piece of art. A lot of people think Godfather 2 is better than Godfather 1. Doesn't happen very often,
Right.
but it is something that's possible to do.
I mean, if you ask me, I personally like The Matrix 2 with the Ghost Twins better than 3 and 1. But a lot of people seem to bash on the sequels and like the original, and that's fine. But as long as people like what they like, then what are you gonna do?
That's right. I will say one thing though. Prequels are much harder to do than sequels because if you're doing a prequel, everybody already knows what's going to happen later.
Right.
To make a prequel interesting, whether it's film, book, or whatever, very difficult to do.
I can agree with that notion. However, if we're gonna like really talk about that, I have to let you know that, let's take Star Wars, for example. I, as you can imagine, did not come up with the original trilogy. I came up with the prequels. Darth Maul, my guy. But had no idea Anakin was Darth Vader. You heard it here first, folks. Daniel Lynch did not know Anakin was Darth Vader. But I knew Darth Vader was a menace and that he would eventually come, because I'm thinking after the third one, hey, Mom, where's the fourth one? Is Luke going to grow up? Like, I was that type of kid, but
more power to you for doing a prequel. It's really difficult to do and get people interested.
Right.
People say they're curious about, well, what was this character like, or what was this situation like before book one or film one? They say that, but then to actually grab them and make them interested in what's going on, it's tough to do. The Star Wars universe, of course, is so big and so popular that there are lots of little niches where, as you know, you can do stuff.
Right.
And people will be interested. But there are other franchises, other stories where people are not as interested, and it is difficult to bring off a prequel.
I can respect that. I can. And you're right, building mythologies, because if you have a fan base of your current work, and will they like more? I mean, it really goes back to what people like, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And what you like, and you try to make the two meet.
There you go. Yep. There you go. So, what is next for you, Alan?
Well, about a year ago, I had to stop going to gym. I was a competitive power lifter for years.
Right.
I had to stop going to gym like everybody else because of COVID. And so I had a little more time on my hands, and I'd always wanted to write orchestral music. So I thought, well, give it a shot. There are computer programs that let you do it now. I complicated somewhat by the fact that I have no musical education. I can't play an instrument. But lo and behold, it worked pretty well. So I've done a bunch of short stuff and 4 symphonies and a symphonic poem and a couple of other little things.
For sure.
And so I'm doing that.
Okay.
Right now I'm writing a ballet for a competition, a score for a ballet for competition.
Very nice.
I have some short stuff coming out, and I do my column, as I mentioned. And coming out next month is a book called The Director Should Have Shot You.
I've heard that. Yeah. How's that coming?
It was supposed to come out this month, but the publisher is very picky about things like illustrations and stuff. So I just talked to him, and we're looking the last half of May for the actual release. The book is being printed right now, but then it has to
Okay.
be bound and distributed. So we're looking the last half of May. The book will be out, and that is, as you apparently know already, uh, a book containing all of these little things, kind of like what we've been talking about.
Right.
People would ask me for years, well, what was it like working on this adaptation? What was it? Did you ever get to meet so and so when you were working on this adaptation?
Right.
And it occurred to me that I ought to jot some of these memories down for when I'm not here, so that when people ask the question and they're told, well, he's dead, the book will be there and people will get the answers to all the questions.
That's
Um,
that's very smart because you get to
well,
have, yeah. I mean, almost like a forever time capsule, or to your work.
if you live long enough, you become history.
There you go. Yep. And you, sir, have definitely made history for sure.
Well, it wasn't intentional. Like I said, sometimes life just happens. And I did get to travel.
This is
Remember,
true.
I did get to travel. In fact, I was shocked when I started traveling that I thought all of these writers that I had admired when I was younger, Asimov and Heinlein and Clark and a lot of the others, that's what I thought they did.
Right.
The ideas and background for their books.
Mhm.
I couldn't understand how you could create, for example, another culture without experiencing other cultures right here, the ones we have available to us. None of them went anywhere. They all did their research reading back issues of Scientific American and Nature and National Geographic magazines.
R-
And all I wanted to do was get out to places, not just places that were obvious, like Europe or Japan, places people didn't go,
The
like
unexplored, the unknown
Gabon,
regions.
Gabon or Papua New Guinea,
There
places
you go.
like that, or
Right.
rural Indians,
Yeah.
instead of just looking at the Taj Mahal. And I've been fortunate enough that I've been able to do that. And sometimes lots of things show up in stories. Sometimes I'll get a whole book out of a trip. There's a book called Into the Out of, which is kind of a contemporary horror fantasy set in East Africa. When I when I went, I made a whole series of notes for this book before I went.
Right.
My wife and I went. We've been invited by friends who were working for the Danish Foreign Aid Agency, actually, there in Tanzania.
Really.
And before I went, I outlined a whole novel, and I thought, well, when I get back, I'll fill it in with local color and stuff that I pick up while I'm there. And the stuff that I saw, the experiences that I had, were so different from what I expected in so many respects that I threw away the outline and wrote a completely different book. And that taught me at that point, I had already been writing for about 12 years. Don't go on a trip with preconceived expectations or notions. Just be a sponge, leave yourself completely open to experiences, and soak it all up. And then when you get home, they will come to you and say, this is what you should write about.
That is very beautiful. Like that. It is. I mean, you're a writer who went to this place with a preconceived thought of, okay, so I'm gonna do my homework, help me set up my product, but instead you were able to transform. No, you were in this place of wonders that really shook your whole aura and came out a different person.
I knew we'd see animals. We were there for 6 weeks. I knew you go to Africa, you're going to see animals, but you don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know under what circumstances.
Right.
And another key that I'll mention to people who look to do this themselves is don't go with a tour, because the only people you meet on a package tour are the people on the tour.
Right.
Also, tour only goes as fast as the slowest person on the tour. So if you got a 92-year-old dude with bathroom problems, it's going to slow your trip down. But people say, well, you go to these scary places, New Guinea and South America. And I say, you don't understand. I said, this is the only news you get generally in the American media anyway is bad news.
Right.
Nobody says today in Peru, nothing bad happened. You don't get that on the evening news. But
Right.
if you go wandering around Peru on your own or with one other person, which is not a bad idea, uh, you will open yourself to experiences, the kinds of experiences you want that you will not have in any other way. You have to go by yourself or with another person or two people. But if you go in a group, you'll spend all your time talking to other people in the group.
I think sharing your experience is better than a single experience.
Sometimes I have to go by myself.
Mm,
My wife, a lot of places I go, my wife doesn't want to go.
right.
Now, most women's idea. I'm sorry if I'm being gender specific here, but most women's idea of a vacation is not spending a week in a tent in the Amazon, being chewed up by bugs, and
Right.
but it was an invaluable experience. I learned a lot about army ants and stinging trees and
Beautiful.
animals that are less hostile.
Right.
Uh,
So good.
it depends what you want. It depends what you want. You can have the same kind of eye-opening experiences walking around London or Rome or Prague if you get out and walk and you're not going on a tour bus.
Right.
And the food's always fine.
Oh yeah.
Tell you a
Right.
quick. I spent a month in India. It's where the book Sagramanda comes from, which is a book set in near future India. And people said before I left, said, well, what are you going to eat? I said, well, I like curry. I could probably have curry every place. The regional food in India is so great and so different from state to state that I said, well, I've got to try this. I'll have curry tomorrow. I got to try this. I'll have curry tomorrow. I got to the end of my trip. I'm in the Sheraton, New Delhi, and it occurs to me I've spent a month in India. I have never had curry.
Come on. Who doesn't love food?
So I ordered some lobster curry. I got
Right.
so sick the next day.
You had to
Another,
try. Had to try.
again, experiences, because what it wasn't from the curry per se. What I figured out was some guy on the street who's cooking food for people on the street.
Uh-huh.
If his food makes them sick, he's out of business within 24 hours. Some guy washing dishes in the back of the hotel kitchen in the big hotel, he's never going to see you. You're never going to see him, and he may not give a damn that particular day. So he may not do such a good job of washing. Um, and I had that happen also in out of coming out of Lima in Peru. So it doesn't matter. Sometimes the fancy hotel food will make you sick. Sometimes the street food will be just fine. But if you don't try the street food, it's another experience you're not having if you're just looking for the local, American style food.
No, you should. If you don't try, you'll never know. But just be careful when you do try something.
100% correct. Right down the line, food wise, and every experience wise, really.
Sure.
I mean, there are experiences you don't want to have. I saw a lot of Asula ants while I was in the rainforest in the jungle in Peru.
Okay.
And there's a guy, professor, who had developed a chart for the most painful stings in the world,
Yeah.
grading them from 10 to 1, 1 being the worst.
Right.
This ant has the worst sting in the world. It's called the bullet ant in other parts of South America because it feels like being shot, which is an experience I've managed to avoid and I have no desire to experience. And I could have done that. Could have let the ant crawl. I said, no. I'll just take his word for it.
There you go.
We'll pass on that experience.
Right.
Okay, so there's experiences and then there's experiences. It goes from food to bugs right down the line.
Right. I have no desire to own a pet snake. I will settle for this guy, Java, but that's as far as I'll go.
See, I like snakes. I had a pet snake. In boa. His name was Sam. He lived for 10 years. And I'll tell you something about pet snakes, provided they're boas or certain python, non-venomous snakes, obviously.
Okay. Yeah.
Venomous snakes or 15-foot long pythons. That's just a macho thing. That's stupid. But a smaller snake, and he was 6 feet long. Unlike dogs, cats, and kids, he never bit anybody.
Right.
Never bit anybody once. I would put him on little tiny kids, and he'd just crawl around. The kids would laugh and giggle, and I thought it was fun. People think snakes are not slimy. Amphibians are slimy. But lizards and snakes, people say, I hate snakes, they're slimy. Then they'll put on their snakeskin belt, pick up their snakeskin purse, and talk about how great it is. So snakes, just think of snakes as quadriplegic lizards.
Oh, say they're like dragons, just without the wings or the horns or the feet. I mean, snake, you don't bother them, they don't bother you, right?
I took a walk once in a place called the Danum Valley in northern Borneo by myself, because I like going out by myself. Because if you go with people, they invariably talk, and that scares off the animals.
Right.
And the head of the guide group there said, well, you shouldn't go by yourself. I said, it's a marked trail. I'm paralleling the river. I can't get lost. He said, well, what if he's trying to discourage me here? He said, well, what if you see a snake? And I said, I'd love to see a snake, because I know from experience that snakes don't want to see you. You're not natural prey.
Right.
It takes energy to make venom. If you use it, you got to make more venom, and that's what you use to catch your food. So snakes will do everything in their power to avoid you, generally. So snakes generally aren't a problem in the jungle. You look for the snake looks for you. And like you said, you go your separate ways. But it's an atavistic fear, snakes. My wife was raised in Texas, central Texas, where there are rattlers everywhere and water moccasins. And so she was raised to fear snakes. I grew up in LA. I wasn't raised to fear snakes.
Right.
I was raised to fear bad drivers. So.
Yep. Yes. You are braver than most, and who knows, there could be a day where Daniel Lynch is best friends with a snake, but that day is not today.
Well, there are snakes here in central Arizona too.
Right.
You live in a place where there are some poisonous snakes, unless you're like we're going to add Chapel Hill or something. But if you go out in the mountains and you see a snake, it's a perfectly understandable fear. It's like fear of spiders, which don't bother me. Used to have a terrible fear of bees and wasps. When I lived in LA, we moved out here, and wasps fly low, bounce off your forehead. Never been stung. Never been stung for the same reason. They don't want to waste their tools. Their tools
because they actually need it for their prey. And like animals, creations, these beings, they're like us as humans. They have their own way of communicating, their own way of living. And because my brother, for example, guy is a full-on nature fanatic. Like, he will go out in the woods and meditate and does a little guru seance or whatever, becomes one with nature, literally a Tarzan. I tell you, my brother has this wasp yellow jacket on his freaking fist. Okay, his fist, and it doesn't bite him. It's just crawling on him all over his thing, and then it flies away.
And that's what they'll do, because you're not prey, and if you don't make yourself a threat, we have a wasp out here called the tarantula hunter.
I wonder why they call it that.
Okay, it's about a 4-inch long wasp. It's number 2 on that scientist's list for most painful stings.
Right.
But I've never been stung, and you get close to them, and they're beautiful. They're like an iridescent purple. It's like a really good wrap job on a small Subaru.
Mm-hmm.
And you get right close up to them and look at them. They're not interested in you. They're just not in. If you don't make yourself a threat, easier with animals than with people. People just go nuts and shoot people.
Yep.
Animals don't do that.
No, they're normally, like I said, they can be peaceful, and we as humans have this frequency fear of things that if we just let our guard down, we'll be okay. Now, unless I don't advise this, if someone ever has the great idea of making an actual Jurassic Park and you want to get close up in person with the T-Rex, no, don't do that. But
even predatory animals, and I've been around large predators. If you're with somebody who knows them, knows their mood, in Botswana, for example, one time, and I try to do this when I can. You go out, if you're staying in a place, lodge, let's say, all the tourists go out with guides. You have to go with a guide, and they're group tours.
Right.
But if you're there for a few days, because most people are only there for 2, 3 days at one place, then they go to another place. If you're there for longer than that, you make friends with people. And I'll go to the head of the organization. I'll say, look, if you've got a driver and a free vehicle, and he'd like to make a few extra bucks, I'd like to hire him in the vehicle for the day. Can we arrange that?
Yes.
Just me and the driver guide, because they do both functions usually. And I've done that in a few places, and that's where you really see stuff. Because not only do you see stuff, you see something and you want to sit for 20 minutes,
Right.
do it.
Right.
So you're not on a prearranged schedule. So we're out driving around along the Chobe River in Botswana. And here's a lioness sitting in kind of an open area. And I'm in an open Jeep. It's not a Land Rover, just a Jeep.
Sure.
And the guy pulls up and we're like, I don't know, 20 feet away. And we're sitting there and, I could tell from his demeanor, he's all relaxed. He's not even looking at her. And it's a local guy. He's seen lions his whole life. But I'm just sitting there enjoying watching her, and she's just sitting there. She's not paying any attention to us. I don't know what's going on with her. Occasionally, she yawns occasionally. Maybe she's getting ready to have cubs. Maybe she just had cubs. But she's by herself. She's not with a pride. We just sit there for 20 minutes, and I'm looking at this gal. And, in 2 seconds, she could be inside that Jeep. But I'm trusting my guide. You always trust people who know. And same thing when you're diving or whatever. And it was a great experience. It's great. The closest I've ever been to a cat that big. I've petted a cheetah, but cheetahs are practically house dogs when they're semi raised.
Right. Right.
Closest I've ever been to like a lion or a tiger. I've been around tigers, but at a distance. But you learn right off. The lion considers you part of the vehicle. People look at videos and say, well, how can you get this close to these cats? The lions consider you part of the vehicle. If you get out of the vehicle, everything changes.
Oh yeah. That's when you're food.
Foot hits the ground. That's right. It's happened to 3 tourists from Taipei many years ago in South Africa. The signs all over the park: stay in your vehicle, keep your windows up, do not get out of your vehicle. And these guys, there are 3 of them. 2 of them got tried a sleeping lion. Sleeping lions look like they're doped up. That's what lions do best, is sleep.
Right.
2 of these guys, all 3 of these guys get out of their car. 2 of them walk over to the lions and turn around to have their picture taken with the lions by the 3rd guy. Well, the lions woke up and ate them. The 3rd guy's the only one who got away because he was near the car when he was taking a picture. And, people think it's Disneyland. It's not Disneyland.
No, these are actual, you are in their territory, actual factual animals that you can have no business messing with.
You listen to the guide, you be careful. You can do interesting things, but you don't do stupid things.
There you go.
Like, I'm not spending my next month in Kabul for a vacation. Or people say, I mentioned before, it's dangerous. Aren't all these things dangerous? I say, you want to do dangerous? Go walk around downtown New York at 2:00 in the morning.
Right.
That's dangerous. But the animals, the animals are not dangerous unless you insert yourself, like you said, into their territory, into their space.
If I were to have a pet tiger or bear, I would have to raise it from a very young age, or
Not advisable.
Not
People
advisable.
do it.
Oh, okay.
We've always had cats.
Yeah, cats.
Cat can rip you up pretty good. House cat.
Right.
And the thing about keeping a big cat as a pet, I can't speak to bears, but a big cat as a pet is you can sleep with the cat, you can raise the cat, you can live with the cat for 8, 9, 10 years, and then the cat has a bad hair day, and suddenly you got a problem. Suddenly you got a problem. It's just like people. Again, we're talking about people. You know somebody your whole life, and then one day they go apeshit and pick up their AK and go out and shoot 6 people.
Right.
There's no indication. This is why when you're talking about gun control, you have to control the gun because you can never control the person. I mean, it would be great to have a registry of, mentally deficient people um, who shouldn't be allowed to own guns. But perfectly normal people can snap. And if they just don't happen to have an automatic weapon handy, things are better. You know who Jim Jeffries is?
Uh-uh.
Australian comedian, works a lot in the United States. Did a stand-up routine on gun control. Go to YouTube and look at it. Hysterically funny and like George Carlin routines, full of a
Right.
lot of truth.
Right. I'll have to check it out.
It's
Yeah.
my recommendation for the day. We're going to have to call this pretty soon, Dan,
Okay.
because my brain is fine, but my throat is not.
I was just going to say, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. It's just after running my mouth for an hour, things get dry, tired.
No, sir, I had fun talking to you.
I had fun talking to you. I did most of the talking, but
Okay, no, I'm definitely I'm open to do this again sometime.
sure.
Great. Let's time out, call it here, and we will talk soon. Enjoy the rest of your day. Right?
You
Got
too,
this.
Dan.
All right.
Have a good day. Have a good month. Pleasure talking to you. And if you want, we'll do it again sometime in the future.
Sounds good, Mr. Foster. Alan, thank you. All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.